Okay, so take a deep breath. We're about to delve into the world of the olden times. Jump into my DeLorean as we start the flux capacitor for the giddy days of yore, when they collected information from people on paper. So I'm being sarcastic. We still need to sometimes collect data on paper. It's called a data capture form. But this is a bit of a misnomer. It's just a piece of paper with some boxes and some writing on it. I guarantee you've seen one of these before. Unfortunately, it's still the job of a software developer to sometimes create paper-based data capture forms. Again, how do we do this successfully? Well, many of the ideas we can take from screen-based data capture. Layout, spacing, all that good stuff. But there are some specifics that only paper would need. And mainly because paper is rubbish. I mean, who wants paper anyway? So a good paper-based data capture form would have been set up to make it easy to transfer whatever someone writes onto it into a computer. I know, it's crazy, but if it is well designed, then the poor guy having to read it and type it in can do it with no hassle. The input will be easy peasy. Layout, again, is key. This time we need to make sure that any paper version matches up 100% with the on-screen version. A one-to-one matching would be great, as this makes it easy to look between that and the screen without getting confused. There are some things that don't map too well though. A drop-down menu, for instance. There's no interactivity on paper, so what we have to do is turn the drop-down menu into a list in the same order. Yeah, I know, but it's the best we can do. Making sure though that it's in the same order as the computer just makes it easy to use. Sad times. Instructions are pretty important for us in this wonderful new world of paper. You thought people could be stupid when they were using interactive forms. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Given the chance to write on paper, people will stick any old thing down just to get it done. We need to make sure that we limit the extent to which this muppetry can ruin the data we are trying to capture. The methods for this are quite obvious. You've seen them many times before. Giving people clear and concise instructions for everything so that they know exactly what to do where, even going so far as to say, write your answers in the box, will save you some fuss later on. Even the village idiot should be able to follow your clear instructions. But that village idiot might not be able to write their answers in any way that's legible. Readability, then, is the last key to a great paper-based data capture form. Finding ways to force the user to write legibly on the form is the last great bastion of form filling. Simple things, like asking them to write in block capitals and in a black pen, can do wonders for this. We can use boxes to force people to write in certain places. Leaving them just enough boxes for a telephone number means that they won't be tempted to write anything else in there. It lets us force them into writing legibly as well, because it lets us limit the amount of characters they use, just like proper interactive validation would. You know, something that's not just a bit of dead tree we're writing on. What other excitement awaits us here then? Well, some people love their dead tree tech. There's a need to actually print out data sometimes, and in these cases, we call them reports. These are just ways of presenting data nicely, usually for specific needs of users. Again, lots of design choices in input UI, both screen and paper, can be used here, especially our favourites of spacing and layout. With reports though, they are output documents. We now need to think about the size of the paper, the colours used, and things like that, just to make it attractive and easy to read. Because that's the eventual goal of a report, is making it easy to read. So when designing them, we need to think about the user again. Who's going to be reading them? Would they prefer raw data or graphs? Is it worth us highlighting relevant sections? And what about using space properly? The interesting thing is that we're back to the obvious ones again. As this is one of the few things in software that will be printed out and stored separately from the live data, it's probably a good idea to give it a clear title. Putting a report in context with a proper title is essential here. Calling something Report 1 just won't cut it. Using a title such as "This report is about all the people that stuck past all the boring bits of this video up to the interesting section" might be more descriptive of what it is. Because we're storing it away from the live data, it's also really important to add a date and a time to it. The data may have changed since that point, so it's useful to know when it was done. Now let's pull back a little bit to the 21st century, because designing user interfaces for data entry on a screen has had some revisions in the way it works that's only come into prominence in the last few years. Remember our friend the iPad? Well, any data entry screen that is built for touch screen devices needs specialist tweaking. We've seen the mouse and the keyboard versions copied over and used in this way, and frankly they are pants. And they're absolutely rubbish, because when you're using a finger rather than a cursor, you need bigger user interface elements, because what you're pointing at with is bigger than a cursor. Bigger touch targets are key. If you're drawing this for an exam, then make sure you explain that the user interface elements, like drop-downs, are bigger for touchscreen use. There also needs to be back buttons, so it's easy to get back from where you've come from. Now this is easy on a desktop, but a touchscreen device might be hiding the default controls to give you more screen space. So we need to consider this. And what about user interface elements that are specific to touch? Well, iOS does a good job of giving us a few of these. There's a specific button, the on-off button. The on-off switch, instead of checkboxes, works well. And a date picker that lets us pick the day, the month of the year, rather than type it in, work really well. All of these make it more efficient to enter data onto a touchscreen device, and believe me when I say that the next time you see them, you probably appreciate them a little bit more. But what about accessibility? This is how we make sure that our disabled users can fully access the data input forms. If we're concerned about people with visual impairments, then using sound rather than text might be a good idea. Finally, we need to think about the possibility that the user might be running their work on an embedded software. This is custom hardware and software that work together just to collect data. Think of the special touchscreens they use in cinemas so that you can order your tickets, or the same type of thing you get in the train station. When we're working on these, you need to use these extra inputs or outputs properly. These could be special buttons or even simple LEDs for outputting error signals. So that's all we really need to know about the collection of data and how to construct a user interface that's effective at the collection of data, whether you're working on digital media or traditional paper-based data capture forms. Don't forget though that the exam questions on this will give you a list of fields and a medium, whether it's screen or paper-based, or even reports, or one of the specialist areas, and expect you to construct a design for the interface to draw it out and label it. When you're doing this, you need to take all of the key points we've discussed and use those. As a quick guide though, make sure that you do the following. Make sure you have titles. Is it easy to see and enter fields? Have you got a field for each bit of data specified? Have you broken the field up into the atomic values, the smallest pieces? Have you used special UI elements like drop-down menus? Do you need to scroll the page at all? Where are the scroll bars? Have a command button to save, reset and close the page all the time. Good use of screen space, making sure things are spaced out sensibly. Name the areas for outputting any data and leave placeholders in place. Explain how the screen deals with more than one search result. Explain any sensible validations. Have clear instructions and use obvious format constraints. Limit boxes like a postcode in a data capture form. Finally, if it's touchscreen, use bigger targets and explain this. By remembering all that and making sure to act on it, you should easily be able to illustrate your understanding of this topic to the examiner and get good marks in the exam.